I like to think of video games as a way of making your own stories through gameplay. Sometimes they're simple, like in the first Super Mario Bros. Game. I ran, I jumped, and I tragically died as my 8-bit body reached terminal velocity in an infinitely deep pit, where I can only assume I joined the millions of eternally falling corpses of would-be princess rescuers that logically would have to be present in such a hole. Other times, the stories are a little more complex. For instance, in Final Fantasy, I might have struggled to defeat a particularly difficult boss until I took the time to study their attacks, level up my characters, and come up with a strategy for victory, with each step in the process having its own trials and tribulations. While the stories written by video game designers can often be clunky, boring, generic, or needlessly complex, the stories created within the games by the players can be what makes them so entertaining to play and talk about. The game that exemplifies this the most for me is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, not only because the stories it offers are so compelling, but more importantly because the game recognizes the creative nature of gaming. It almost forces you to engage with him that way. The Legend of Zelda makes you live and think in the moment. The main aspect of the game that separates it from most others I've played, even other open world games, is a sense of complete agency over what the player does. Not in the sense that they can control the character, that's a trait shared by most games, but in that the player is the one who decides what task they're going to accomplish. To compare to another recent title, Marvel's Spider-Man is set in an open world similar to Zelda's Hyrule, but opens by giving you a place to go to and expects you to go there. After completing a 20-something minute mission/tutorial, you're sent to another place with another thing to do, and then you start unlocking towers, which fill your map in with more things to do, even adding a checklist to the menu. From there, the game becomes about filling in the map and doing all those things that the game says you can do. Or not, it's your choice. In practice, this style of open world game design is closer to a series of connected levels than an actual world. The player may be given freedom, but the psychological center of attention clearly stated by the game is on checking off a list. The experience rides on the thrill of the gameplay, which, to be fair, is quite thrilling, rather than a player's decision making. Zelda, on the other hand, doesn't bother with any of that. Zelda's opening starts by teaching you a few basic mechanics over the span of about a minute, and then lets you mess around in a digestible area of the map until you want to move on to the rest. Along the way, there are light nudges in the direction that the game's story continues in, but it's by no means the most interesting or the only option. The game wants you to get distracted. After all, in between the player and the first tower lies an area filled with monsters, secrets of all sorts, animals, plants, worn-down buildings, and a diverse set of geography, all of which could lead to adventures that have nothing to do with your suggested goal. When a section of the world map is unlocked, no glowing icons or dots appear to guide you. For the first, there's an old man who points you towards some interesting things to do, but that's about all you get out of him. In fact, if you talk to him more, he basically tells you to suck it up and deal with it. The game continues to give you almost full freedom while lightly suggesting that you go in a specific direction for a little while until they tell you to go to the four corners of the continent, at which point you're not really just going to do that, right? There's so much other stuff to do. The game doesn't expect you to do what it asks. If it did, you would be on your way to kill the final boss by the second hour because that's like the first mission you're given. Breath of the Wild asks its players to set their own goals. While Spider-Man and most other games are focused on finishing things with their checklists and level-by-level progressions, Breath of the Wild is a game focused on doing things. That doesn't necessarily detract from Spider-Man, it's a really fun game. Zelda's design philosophy is just very different from its own, and leads to a markedly different experience. So, what does that experience feel like? To start, with minimal attention paid to in-game missions, the player is placed in a position where they have to have fun by deciding what to do. As coined in a video by YouTube channel Design Doc, Breath of the Wild is designed to have an exploration cycle, a loop of curiosity leading to discovery, which in turn leads to curiosity again, keeping the player invested. First, you choose a direction to go in, based on the map or by seeing something interesting in the distance, aided by the ability to see almost anywhere in the world from most points in the game, depending on altitude. Driven by the urge to discover more, you traverse terrain, encounter challenges, and find a way around those challenges until eventually arriving at your goal, at which point you're rewarded either by an in-game reward, like a spirit orb for completing a shrine or a Korok seed, or just a nice looking view, which there's no shortage of. Inevitably, the new vantage point exposes a new curiosity in the distance, and the cycle begins again. The reward at the end of the journey varies, but isn't necessarily important to the cycle as a whole. The loop would break fairly easily if the journey wasn't worth journeying. The most important part of the sequence of actions is the relationship between a challenge and the completion of a challenge, all of which is driven by the central mechanics of the game. Movement, jumping, melee attacks, long-range attacks, gliding and climbing are the basic abilities, but magic like magnesis, stasis, cryonesis, and bombs are all given fairly early on to the player. More are taught later, but for the most part, the building blocks are all there from the start. These abilities are all well and good on their own, but their interlocking nature is what makes the world feel genuinely alive, and gameplay that much more creative. Sure, a bomb can be used to blow something up, but why stop there when you can blow something up, run over, use the fire created by the blast as an updraft to glide on and gain some height, and then attack from midair? Varying enemies, food, armor, stealth, horses, and weather add even more complications to these mechanics, interacting with each other in logical ways, leading a player to experiment and create new and exciting ways of completing old tasks. Challenges in the game present themselves in a variety of ways, but mainly in three forms: traversal, enemies, and puzzles. It may not initially seem like it is, but the terrain of the game also pushes the player to make decisions. At CEDCC 2017, a video game design conference, Nintendo described how they implemented a triangle rule in designing areas, meaning that they built terrain generally in the shape of triangles, like mountains or hills, automatically giving players three different ways of travel: around to the left, around to the right, or climbing over. The player, even when just moving, is always coming up with new ways to get around the map. Enemies and puzzles find uses for the mechanics of the game, and depending on the area and resources available, offer more opportunities to innovate. The innovation forced and offered by each type of challenge is what makes the game so continually engaging and exciting. There's no correct way to go about solving any problem. I've often heard my friends describe situations where they're unsure of if they solved a shrine the right way or not, and the truth is, there's no correct way of doing anything in this game. The point is that the doing was worth your time.
今回は例えば大きな岩があるからそれを上から転がして敵を潰すとか、坂の下にいる敵に向かって爆弾を転がしてみるとか、今までにないようなその戦闘の幅っていうのがその物理と戦闘っていうのを組み合わせることで実現できています。ユーザーがそういうシチュエーションを見つけて自分に有利になるようにその戦闘を進めていくっていうことが、今回のその遊びの特徴なんじゃないかっていうことで、その多少ずるいっていうような戦い方とか、勝ち方ができてしまっても、そのずるいっていうような勝ち方を見つけることが楽しければ、それはユーザーにとっては楽しい体験になるので、それは OK としようっていう形で、戦闘を整えていった。
That quote, I think, nails the philosophy behind the game. Moment-to-moment engagement is centered far more on than in other titles, where it might be placed on finishing a set of tasks in an extremely specific way. That's why item durability and expendables like food feel like such a big mechanic. It literally stops you from thinking too much about the future because, within an hour or two, your technique of playing the game will be entirely changed by the weapons and food you have at your disposal. The player, with no artificially set goals, and because so much about their current state is temporary, bases their gameplay style on what they can currently do and what they think will be the most fun. It's in this way that I think, and this might seem like a bit of a stretch at first, bear with me, Breath of the Wild says something pretty profound about life in general. The statement being that there's nothing more important than right now. 2.5 weeks ago, I graduated from high school. I'm going to Tufts in the fall, a 5-minute walk from where I currently live, and I'm very excited, at least I think so. I'm a bit nervous too. That's natural. The point is, I've been in an environment for my entire life where the goal has, more or less, been getting to college. I don't think that's a very healthy philosophy, but it's what I know. My family's Jewish. I've been working toward this one thing for the last 17 years, and suddenly I have it, and there was a tremendous amount of joy for a week or two, and now there's not. There's just no purpose, and I've tried relaxing and working on projects, but it doesn't feel meaningful in the same way. It doesn't feel big, it doesn't feel grand, and it definitely doesn't feel important. There's no urgency. I'm in a time in my life where no outside force is dictating what is or what is not the correct thing to do in terms of the overarching span of my life, and that freedom can feel hollow. Living in the moment is a phrase I've heard for years and almost never understood in full, because of course I can live presently, but there must be something pressing in the back of my head that I'm forgetting about that should take up more of my brain right now, right? There's always that urge. It's not a problem with living in the moment, it's a problem with focus. One of the only solutions I've ever found to the anxiety is a fantasy video game with a core gameplay aspect dedicated to collecting the poop of forest creatures. The design of the game, I think, by centering mechanics that encourage living in the moment, can get a player to think in different ways than they might usually. I know it did for me, at least. The lack of a checklist guide in the game is unusually similar to the lack of school in my current life. At the same time, real life has at least the same amount of possibilities, and in reality much, much more for creativity. There aren't limits. It makes fun the goal in the place of business, like defeating the Dark Lord or finishing a homework assignment. Playing Breath of the Wild is possibly the least stressful thing I've ever done. It gives you freedom and teaches you how to see that freedom as not overwhelming. It's almost therapeutic. I think it makes the best case that I've seen for video games being art. It has this capacity to make a player think about their own life, not through a story, but through play. And the philosophy that it teaches can be extended to the world outside of the game. If I can make my own meaning in a game, I can do it in life too. It's like a testing ground for a healthier mindset. A bigger purpose is not necessary if the moment to moment is worthwhile. I still struggle to fully apply that idea to my own life. It's a tough lesson to learn. Zelda helps for a while, and I think that's all that matters.
Hi.
Hey, it has been quite some time. I think it's been 5 months since the Remy Minkoff Chronicles Part 2 was uploaded, and it's been 10 months since I last uploaded a video essay, so this is a long time coming. Sorry about that. I was sort of, finishing high school, and I sort of got swept up in that. And I think, that was the appropriate choice to make for me at the time. Anyway, as usual, it'd be great if you guys could like and subscribe. And actually, I think in the video I said I graduated 2.5 weeks ago, but I sort of procrastinated this a bit, so it's actually 4 weeks at this point, but whatever. In the past 5 months, I have been, doing some things. You can find a link to some short stories that I've written on a blog in the description. It might even be on screen right now. My brother has been up to some stuff. Actually, you saw Joe in the video. He was in some of those pictures. Joe just started a podcast with my friend Nick, who has been in some of my videos in the past. Actually started in auditioning. Joe, which is, that's quite good. That'll be either on screen somewhere. Joe's webcomic is quite good. I've been really liking the most recent issue. You should check that out. All the sources that I used in this video are probably also on screen if I decided to put them up on screen. But if not, they're in the description. That design doc video is really good, and he knows a lot more about video game design than I do, so I think you should check it out. I pretty much, anything that refers to, the broader sort of, the more complex aspects of video game design, I pretty much took from his video, being the, exploration cycle, and the triangle rules from an article also, but was also featured in that video. The Making of Legend of Zelda series, which was featured in this video, is also in the description. Great watch, actually. That's a really good documentary. God, I think that might be it. Geez, what else? This song I have playing in the background is The Traitor by the Beach Boys, and I love it. I'm playing it here because it's about exploration, and I thought that was sort of connected to Zelda. It featured in the video a bit during the whole graduation bit, so I hope you enjoyed that. I think it's also about colonialism and sort of the emotional implications of it. The song, that is, not graduation. But hopefully, that can be ignored for the purposes of this video. Thank you, as always, for watching. This, as usual, the end segments are pretty off the cuff, pretty improvisational in tone, and generally fairly long. So thank you for watching yet again. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is, how I don't make money, because I don't make any money off of this. But this is how I have fun. So I would appreciate it. Or not, you can do whatever you want. See ya.